achievement of the SDGs than investment in sustainable infrastructure. Such sustainable infrastructure investment is key to the transformation needed to meet the core criteria for SDG achievement: growth, social inclusion, and low carbon outcomes. There is a huge deficit in current infrastructure financing. Multilateral development banks invest only around $40 billion annually in infrastructure, and the private sector invests only $15 billion. The developing countries need to invest at least 6 to 8% of their GDP to achieve 5% growth. To bridge this gap, governments must aim to contribute about $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion in investment. The private sector, another 1 to 1.5 trillion, multilateral development banks, 150 billion, and official development assistance, at least 50 billion annually. There is a solid economic rationale to prioritize infrastructure investment in developing countries. The returns on investment in developing countries, if well structured, can be double and triple those in advanced economies. The following policy actions are essential for such mobilization: expanding the capacity and incentives of national and multilateral development banks to provide long-term infrastructure financing, enabling through appropriate investment guidelines and incentives, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, private equity funds, and endowments, as well as the $30 trillion insurance sector, to deploy a larger part of their capital in long-term infrastructure investment. Expanding national capital markets in developing countries, encouraging businesses to adopt frameworks for long-term value creation, reviewing the risk criteria used by rating agencies to enhance financial access for developing countries, supporting regional and cross-border infrastructure initiatives, utilizing advances in IT and digital applications, and most importantly, assisting developing countries to prepare feasible and bankable infrastructure projects. A sustainable infrastructure investment facility could mobilize and deploy adequate long-term financing for infrastructure investment in the developing countries. Several platforms have been established. These have yet to mobilize significant investment in developing countries. The developing countries must be able to participate equitably and have a voice in such financial mechanisms. To this end, a sustainable infrastructure investment facility should be created as a public-private partnership under the umbrella of the United Nations. The extensive expertise within the UN system, including its country offices in most developing countries, could be utilized to identify and prepare viable, sustainable development projects prioritized by the developing countries themselves. The UN system, including its country offices in most developing countries, could be utilized to identify and prepare viable, sustainable development projects prioritized by the developing countries themselves. With global political support, this UN-affiliated facility could mobilize, maximize, and coordinate investment decisions and actions by developing countries, ODA providers, and private and public sector investors to advance the realization of the SDGs. I thank you, Madam President.